Welcome back for another one of our RedRecover.com Inside the Paint shows. And again, when a lot of people ask Orlando Alzugaray, why Big O are you featuring basketball in August? Kurt, I can't find many other times when I can think of so much to fill up an hour right now. So I think we're going to have plenty to talk about. You have the NBA schedule dropped earlier today and dropped the Heat flat on their head with only 11 national broadcasts. You have out there where you are in LA doing your work for NBC Sports, LeBron James agreeing to a 2-year extension, which is very good for LeBron James financially at $100 million.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not so good for the Los Angeles Lakers and any visions of great cap space going forward. We'll touch on that. And just this past week, I know Kurt read the stories, had a chance to talk to both Udonis Haslem and Tyler Hero regarding their upcoming seasons. Both very level-headed as far as their approach. Udonis taking his time. Tyler saying, hey, I'm getting ready for a season. I will be playing somewhere. He knows about the trade rumors. He knows about the extension, whether we'll get it or not get it. We will get into all of that. And I get the feeling somewhere along the way, we will mention the names Kevin Durant and Donovan Mitchell as well, because that apparently is a requirement. Just like Red Recover will take care of all that ails you, apparently when it comes to all the NBA trade rumors, there will always be Kevin Durant and there will always be Donovan Mitchell until finally it might get over. Kurt, I want to start, though, where we talk with Big O on the Crosstalk. And especially someone like you, who with your work with NBC Sports, you take a national view of everything. We know certain teams you fully expect to get the maximum amount of games. You expect a team like the Warriors with Steph and their championship and their storylines. You mentioned on our Crosstalk Luka Doncic, maybe the most charismatic and interesting player in the NBA. I get that also. The Miami Heat received 11 national television games. That's defined by ABC, ESPN, or TNT. We don't count NBA TV because, number one, they switch up those games anyway. They're not available in the local market, and it's done by local broadcasters for the most part. So it doesn't have the feel of a national broadcast. You're not sitting there with Kevin Harlan or Stan Van Gundy or ESPN's people. And then I looked around a little bit, and I saw the Lakers have 27 such games. I don't remember the Lakers very much in last year's playoffs, so maybe in a couple of seconds you can help me out on that, Kurt. Saw the Philadelphia 76ers with 23 such games. Last I remember, the Heat beat the 76ers in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Then, of course, I looked at the Knicks and saw they have 13, even more than the Heat do anyway. A year ago, I would have had no issue. The Heat last year had 10 national games, one fewer than this year. They were coming off a number 6 playoff seed. They only finished 8 games over 500, and they were swept 4-0 by the Bucks in the first round. I get it. Kurt, you know, especially down here, in so many of the blogs and so much social media, people think the league have it, quote unquote, out for the Heat. I don't necessarily think so. But I want you to give me, especially because of where you are, the long view, out in LA, sort of the entirety of the country. Are the Miami Heat interesting enough?
That might be part of the problem. By the way, I get the league is out to get us thing. I will tell you right now, there are 30 teams unhappy with their schedule, right? it is universal. Nobody likes their schedule when it comes out. They all kind of complain about it. It is what it is. But it must be, interesting is a good word. You know, Big O use sexy. Look, the Lakers have LeBron James and they have the biggest fan base, you know, the biggest international fan base. They're the Lakers. It's going to be what it is. But you see the Knicks getting more, and that's the one, like, I kind of get Philly a little. Like, I thought they'd max out around 20 because Joel Embiid is a charismatic player. They've got James Harden.
MVP
it is a
level,
big market.
sure.
Yeah. The Knicks at home, by the way, on Christmas in Madison Square Garden, it's like it's a tradition. Like we have to watch the.
You know what? I'm going to tell you, Kurt.
Every year.
Kurt, I get that a little bit because I grew up in New York as a Knicks fan. They always played on Christmas. Remember, Bernard King had his great Christmas Day games. I can understand the tradition of that. And to me, the equivalency there is every year we get some god-awful Detroit Lions football game on Thanksgiving. And you're going through your games. Thankfully now the NFL has added like 2 or 3 others, and there's an NFL Network game at night so you can see real football. I get the tradition of that. I was not as offended by Christmas. Number one, no one likes to work on Christmas. All the people I know down at FTX Arena would rather be home with their family, the vendors, the ushers, the security people. I have no issue with that. I'm just looking at a bigger picture of this when it comes to the Heat. And I'm writing this for my Ask Ira at the Sun Sentinel tomorrow. Do Heat players have to threaten to want to get traded? Do they have to hold out? Do they have to post things on their TikToks to get attention? Big O pointed out, yes, Tyler Hero has put his girlfriend aside, but Tyler Hero has always had that kind of following from the suit he wore on draft night ever since. He styles when he's out there. I get that. You can make an argument Duncan Robinson doesn't style, Dwayne Dedmon doesn't style, Max Strus doesn't style. I get all of that. But shouldn't the NBA take pride in the organizations that do things the right way? The Miami Heat play for the playoffs every year. The Miami Heat don't tank unless Michael Beasley and Derrick Rose are out there. That's 1 out of 35 years. It would seem to me if you do things the right way, you should be rewarded. And to me, and again, I have no stake with the Heat. I'm not a friend of the Heat. I cover the Heat. I don't work from the Heat. I don't draw a check from the Heat. Do draw a check from redrecovered.com. So folks, please go to that website. That I get. But Kurt, if a team does things the right way, don't they deserve to be rewarded for doing things the right way?
You would like to think so, but you've seen this in other places. The Utah Jazz, pre-teardown this season, one of the most stable, one of the smartest organizations, and build a team that had the best record in the NBA.
Correct.
When you're head, almost never on it, right? Almost never. Like they didn't get a lot of national games, and frankly, Donovan Mitchell's kind of interesting. Like that was an interesting team to watch, but there was something about them, and in the league. Yeah, you should. Yes, to me, and I think just going back to the LeBron era and the fan base they built, like this is a fan base that's a little more national than I think maybe the league sets in on. It's not Lakers level national, but it is national. Like I see Heat jerseys everywhere. There is a love of the franchise, and maybe it's just from people who grew up watching LeBron in the Heat, but there is and people from Miami spending part of the time in other parts of the country and what have you and moving. There is a fan base everywhere for the Heat, and it's one of the bigger ones. It feels to me, and yet, like you said, when push comes to shove, when the numbers come out, we're getting more Knicks.
We just are. Matter of fact, even Brooklyn, with the uncertainty with Durant and with Kyrie, has more national games also. Not the number you would expect for Brooklyn if they were a known quantity.
No, they would have been in the high 20s, right?
I mean, but they're still 13 or 14. They're still up there, so I don't get that. There's another component of the schedule I wanted to talk to you about because with your work at Pro Basketball Talk and just being a fan of the game and all this, the NBA very proudly, I mean, you got the release, I got the release. They significantly reduced travel this season.
Yes. And
they significantly reduced it by this. The Heat have 6 of these. 6 times this season, the Heat will play the same opponent in consecutive home games. They have some Charlotte, Toronto, Cleveland, Atlanta. They're Milwaukee twice. There's a bunch of those. Here's my argument against that, Kurt. One of the fun things about being a fan is picking and choosing your games by picking and choosing who you want to see play. Okay, I want to see Trae Young play for Atlanta. I want to see Giannis Antetokounmpo play for the Bucks. Right. When Toronto comes in, huge Fred VanVleet fan, want to see him. Here's my problem, and I wonder I want to give you a little story idea so you can knock it out there at Pro Basketball Talk after this.
I'm writing a news and notes column on the schedule release later tonight. So yeah,
perfect. Because here's my problem with that. When you play the same team twice in a span of 3 days, as the Heat does 6 times this year, if a player is injured and not available, he's probably not available for both of those games. So if you want to see Trae Young, okay, let's say Trae Young in February has an ankle sprain. But maybe he wasn't injured in December or in March or afterwards, where you could say, damn, I'm really kind of PO'd. I'm not going to get to see Trae this weekend. I'm going to make sure I catch the Hawks the next time they're in. No, this is the only time they're in. Same thing with Giannis. The Heat have a Thursday night game against Giannis and then a 1 p.m. Saturday game against Giannis. Highly doubtful if he or Chris Middleton or Drew Holiday are injured on Thursday. They're turning around right after a day off and playing on Saturday. So I understand it saves the players themselves. God bless the players. They don't make a lot of money. They deserve to be saved. But the poor schmo fan who's out there who wants to see someone, I think that's the problem. Even the Wizards, the Heat have a game against the Wizards the day before Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving. You want to see Bradley Beal. You saw him play at Florida. You want to catch him again. I think that's sort of a downside. So I want to ask you, with what I just said, but also you've written so many pieces at NBC Sports and Pro Basketball Talk about the schedule and the travel and the back-to-backs and the grueling nature. And because you're out there with Kawhi, load management. Did the league necessarily get this right based on what I just offered up to you and what you've heard over so many years about the load management thing?
There's a balance they've got to find, but to me, the flip side of that is there is some energy in that second game. This is a little more like a playoff series in that you adjust to that team in the second game in a way that, look, you and I know this, and I think hardcore fans know this, but I'm not sure everybody knows this. Teams don't practice much. Like, again, this is a recovery league. This is a Red Recover.com. They should be using the equipment, the Red Recover equipment, but it is about resting guys during the season. And then even guys who are not on load management, like they don't, Doc Rivers practices less than any team. And partially when he was in LA, I just thought it was golf, but I think it's carried over to Philly where he can't golf in the winter. Because of that, you get less travel, but you do get a certain level of, all right, well, they beat us this way last time. We're going to switch our pick and roll coverage. We're going to pressure here. This worked a little bit at the end of that game. We're going to try this more. So you do get a little of that, but I think you're right that the trade-off is not ideal for fans when guys are injured and guys are out, or frankly, just, if I'm a baseball fan, I expect to see the Marlins 3 times in a row, and then whoever,
which I always hated about being a baseball season ticket holder, never understood, is who says, oh boy, 4 straight Pirates games, yay.
Yeah, exactly. You get used to it, but it's a little weird. But if I have Miami Heat season tickets, hey, it's fine if I get to see the Bucks twice in a row, maybe, or something where there's some fire in that game. But if I got the Magic twice in a row, or whatever, like some other team, then I'm not as interested. I thought the league would do more with, hey, let's keep a team in Florida, keep the travel down that way. It makes a lot of sense to have teams play the Knicks and then the Nets, right? Like, stay in New York. We'll have you play.
And the Heat have one of those. The Heat's trip out to LA is Clippers day off Lakers. So they do have that, and that's smart. Stay at Staples Center, or what is it now? FTX Arena?
Yeah.
FTX.com arena?
It is now the Crypto.com arena.
Crypto.com. I'm sorry. Don't want to hurt any sponsors. They know they might join the Big O show along the way. So I'm staying out there in LA Live, downtown at the Courtyard. It's easy. You walk right over. You walk right back. I get all of that. Let me ask you this, because I guess we need to get to this also. So the Jazz are an uncertain team. We don't know who they're going to have. But the NBA came out and said, hey, let's show the Knicks Jazz national TV on November 15th because Donovan Mitchell will be playing somewhere. So I'm going to put you back in the league office. Matt Winnick for years put the schedule together. Now it's a computer and an isolated room and other people going around it. The Brooklyn Nets. One, maybe you're a Heat fan. You want to come see the Nets when they play in Miami or just otherwise. Mid-August, August 17th, Kurt Helin, your thoughts. Who are and how good and what will the Brooklyn Nets be?
I think that they are going to draw pretty good ratings in a train wreck variety, right? Like in the car crash, I'm looking at what's happening on the other side of the barrier because it's not affecting my lane, but I want to see how bad that accident is. There's going to be some rubbernecking, right? Like Durant holds out, then how does everybody handle with that? And Kyrie shows up, how does everybody handle that? If Durant shows up, it is a show. Well, I can't use the first word I want to use there. It is going to be crazy. And I think the other part Ben Simmons is going to show up and play, and that's like the 4th or 5th biggest storyline going into the Nets season. Like, I think that there's interest in them from that drama standpoint. They're probably not going to be very good. I can't imagine even if they would be good.
I got to ask you why. I'm going to take sort of you're going to the macro and I'm going to go to the micro, okay? Kevin Durant is great and a top 5 NBA player, correct?
Yeah.
Kyrie Irving is one of the top 5 bucket getters in the NBA when he shows up, when he plays? Yes or no?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Best handles in the league.
Ben Simmons, when I'm going to combine two skills, okay? The combination of passing and defense, those two skills together, probably a top 10 player. I know there's a 3 and D, but let's call him an assist and D player, okay? Probably top 10 when it comes to that, correct?
Absolute top 4 or 5, probably, yeah.
Okay. Joe Harris, 3-point shooter, top 10 with his volume.
Yeah, when he's healthy, yeah, easily.
Okay, with his volume. I don't understand. Big O and I went through this all last season when I had fear of God in the Nets, and he absolutely ridiculed me as the Celtics were eviscerating them in the first round. But why are so many people – are people simply sleeping because they don't believe the chemistry can ever come together, because they believe once you rip a coach and a general manager and everyone's on their own? I mean, Kyrie Irving has had great seasons, had a championship season. Kevin Durant has had great seasons, had a championship season. Ben Simmons was a lot to Philadelphia during their rise from the process. Why can't the Nets be great?
Because they'd all have to get in a room and pull the rope the same direction. Like, it's just, there isn't that chemistry. This is going to be, I don't know, more like the Lakers or Nets of last year, I feel like, where you think on paper this should work better than it really looks once you start playing it. Even if they're healthy, I just got to, you still have to have, everybody buying in. Like, you have to have everybody on the same page. And Kyrie, I got a feeling, is going out there looking to put up numbers because he doesn't want to be there. He saw what his market value was. And it's like, no, I'm going to remind everybody who I am. And we're going to have some no pass into the open. I don't care how open Joe Harris is. I'm taking the shot nights. Like, I think you're just going to get a lot of that type of play. And I'm not sure, I don't know how good a coach Steve Nash is. I really don't, because I don't know that he's gotten. I think Durant was right at the end of last season. With COVID and injuries and everything else that's gone on there, I don't think he's gotten a chance to show what he can do. I'm also not convinced he is the kind of charismatic leader that's got everybody pulling. Again, grabbing that rope and pulling it in the same direction. I just don't think he can do it. I think that team is going to be selfish and lost.
I want to stay sort of on the national, but also tied into the local down here after the break. And I didn't put this on the show sheet, so Kurt, you might have 90 seconds to do your research. After the break, I want to get in today. It's always something. Just when free agency starts, Kevin Durant wants a trade. Just when the schedule is coming out, LeBron James gets an extension today. I want to ask you about the LeBron James extension. I want to ask you if he could in any way have hurt the Lakers' chances to really rebuild with the money, $50 million a year on the books. And just where this puts LeBron. Is it more about the money, more about being out where you are in LA and the opportunities in the entertainment industry? Is this purely a basketball decision? Or is this because I think down here, people have seen the two faces of LeBron?
Yeah.
There is part of him that wants to be the greatest basketball player ever. This contract extension should allow him to pass Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as the highest scoring NBA player ever. But was this a LeBron decision? Or was this a Lakers decision? So we'll be back after the break with Kurt Helin on the Inside the Paint, redrecover.com Heat Report. LeBron James, good guy, bad guy, hurting a team, helping himself, after the break. Welcome back to the redrecover.com Inside the Paint show. I'm going to be honest with people. Usually what I'll do is I'll sort of text Kurt a show sheet. We'll do this in each block, and you can obviously listen to each block on our podcast here on the Big O Show. I did not expect anything today but the NBA schedule. We get the schedule ahead of time. We're basically told by the teams. Some of us actually honor that request. Nothing until 3 p.m. when the schedule comes out. You see all kinds of stuff leaked ahead of time. Have to be very careful and diplomatic. There were some years when the league did fine teams when they saw teams actually gave out information to the media. Obviously, ESPN pays a lot of money for that. NBA TV followed up with their own special. About, I'd say 15 minutes before, maybe even less, all of a sudden, Shams and Woj and LeBron James has an extension. We were expecting it could happen. I'm not sure we were expecting it on schedule day. The one advantage of the show, Kurt Helin from Pro Basketball Talk at NBC.com, NBCSports.com, got to get that right, is out there in Los Angeles. He sort of has the pulse of the whole deal. Kurt, can you take us through what happened today with LeBron James?
This was always the expected outcome. By the way, I'm going to do a quick callback because I actually tried to do some research in that little mini break. 55 nationally of those we'll call them the baseball series, the 2 games in a row, 55 of them on the schedule league-wide this year. That's a huge leap from
and 55 chances to one player doesn't play in your market and you never see him all season, even though the team visits twice. You can listen to our first segment on our podcast for all that background, but I'm going to put you on the spot, Kurt, because it seems every time LeBron James does a contract, there's a twist. It's either to hold the teams sort of against the fire, that he can opt out right away if he doesn't get what he wants. He wants a championship. Matter of fact, I think almost every one of LeBron's contracts, including to the Heat, had some sort of option year. He was able to manipulate the end of it to get what he wants from the team he's either leaving or the team he's joining. How does sort of this 2-year extension shake out, Kurt?
It is, like I said, this was expected, and the 1+1 that he signed, the 2 years, but player option second year, was always expected. This time, it's not completely about holding the Lakers' feet to the fire, although that's probably part of it. It's about Bronny, right? That second year is when LeBron's son is eligible to enter the NBA draft, all things panning out, him going to college. It looks like he's going to go to college somewhere. And I'm not going to get into the is Bronny. We'll save is Bronny an NBA player conversation for another day. He would get drafted somewhere if LeBron wants him there, because somebody will take LeBron, and probably in LA.
Oh, but sure.
Anyway,
I think there's some teams that would take LeBron and Kurt Helin just to sit on the end of the bench in a Udonis Haslem type role. So I think we're good with that. I think LeBron can bring any +1 he wants to the party, and the party will embrace him.
Right. And because not just what he does on the court, but frankly, what Miami, the Heat, I'm sure the Aarons and everybody would be happy to tell you, he packs the building, he sells sponsors, he brings ratings. He is a financial juggernaut with wherever he's playing, and is worth way more than he'll get just in salary to the organization.
I'm going to interrupt you there for Kurt, because that's a really interesting point here. I'm going to take it a bit further. So you're saying LeBron James today agreed to a 2-year extension. Only the first year is locked in with the Lakers, or in the contract that he's tied to a team. The second year he can opt out of, go where he wants when his son becomes NBA draft eligible, depending on the new CBA, if it's the same rules. At what point in the draft would you take, I guess LeBron would be 39 then. If you had the number 1 pick, would you take Bronny to get LeBron?
No, I don't. I mean,
that's what all of a sudden when you were talking, I just got curious about that. That's going to be a fascinating subject. At what point do you crap can your season and your draft, because you were going to be able to, in Sacramento and Indianapolis and Oklahoma City, sell like you've never sold before? We talked about the schedule in our first segment. You can listen to that on the podcast. You would be getting 27 games like the Lakers would to see LeBron and Bronny. So I just wonder, I know I put you on the spot here. I know this wasn't on the show sheet. I know I'm an awful person, but it's later today. It's not wake up time. You've already been caffeinated. Give me a draft number. At what point, at 1, at 5, at 10, at 12, at 15, would you say, this is a god-awful draft pick? This guy might not be able to play at all. We saw Dwayne Wade's son try to play in the G League last year, for example. Didn't really pan out. We've seen a lot of second-generation talent. The Heat have tried out Anthony Mason Jr., Patrick Ewing Jr. has come through. They've had a lot of the younger players as a courtesy with their G League team. But where in a draft would you, knowing what draft picks are worth on that value card, where would you draft Bronny James in order to get LeBron James for 2 seasons for your team at age 40?
I will say I've had this direct conversation with scouts and other people, and what I got a lot of was, if he wasn't LeBron's son, and how much money he's going to make off of the NIL. Like, he is going to be, he might actually have to take a pay cut to go to the NBA on some level. He's still a stay in college kind of player. Maybe he should play 2 or 3 seasons. He should develop. I've had a couple of people say, well, we might throw a late second round pick at a guy like that because he's athletic.
Sure.
But he's an athletic. Dad is 6'9" and otherworldly in so many ways physically. Bronny's 6'3". There's a whole lot of 6'3" guys, 6'4" guys who are elite athletes. It's hard to work your way through that. You know, not everybody gets to be Dwayne Wade, man. Like, you got to really put in the work.
It reminds me a lot of Sharif O'Neal, who got a tryout with the Lakers, an invitation to camp. Obviously, nothing like Shaquille O'Neal, his father's build. Right. A completely different player. Honestly, I mean, look, he had that terrible heart situation at UCLA, and we understand. Thank God he made it through. I think he went to LSU. Is that correct? He briefly
Correct.
was there. Yeah, but he's just a guy. But when you're a guy with a famous father, you get a chance. So to bring it back to LeBron, then I won't force you to give me a draft choice. What does this extension do vis-a-vis the Lakers' ability to or not to get better?
By the way, my guess would be Bronny's late first round. As for the Lakers, this ties their hands a little bit. They will still have some cap space next year.
I hate to do this because I hate when people do this to me. So, and again, no one's aggregating. Don't aggregate this, people. Roughly, do you think if LeBron goes in with that number, would they have enough for a max player or even close to that with Westbrook going out?
No, even with Westbrook off the books. I have seen this worked out. I want to say, because everybody, look, LeBron was a max player. We kind of knew what this number was going to be. And by the way,
more than max player, sure.
Yeah. And just to be clear, for everyone out there listening, LeBron is under contract for this coming season for 44.5. That was already locked in. This is an extension.
This is an extension, correct.
Right. So he's got 2 locked-in season with the Lakers, then a player option. They aren't going to have a ton of cap space next year anyway. It's in the 20 million range, depending on what they do or don't do. It is not max player. It becomes really hard to get to max player just because they are such a top-heavy roster, right? And part of the reason that they are willing to go all in on Kyrie Irving and maybe throw both draft picks and try to make that happen is simply they can if they can get him, then they've got his bird rights.
Bird rights, correct.
Him in a way that they can't offer him as a free agent. So they don't have max money next year. They have some. They'd be able to do more, but they don't have the money to go get whatever big names will.
So it's not a matter of LeBron is sort of hurting them or setting them back from what they could be, that you sort of figured if he was there, he's going to get roughly this type of money anyway.
Right. And honestly, unless he wanted to pull a James Harden, I'm sure that was not tampering. No. Unless he wanted to do something like that where he took a steep pay cut, they were never going to have cash. And by the way, LeBron and Chris Paul have been at the front of I'm not taking less. I'm not taking less from the ownership. I'm going to get every penny I can get. And hey, you and I and everybody listening, we're all trying to get every penny we can get. So I don't really fault them there. So
we have LeBron. He has this extension now. Are the Lakers going to be any good during the rest of LeBron James's career? And again, Anthony Davis is a great player when he's on the court. Other than that, I mean, I know you know far more about the Lakers roster than I do this season. You can talk all you want about Darvin Ham going in and is going to make Russell Westbrook all of a sudden this dead-eye three-point corner shooter that I don't think he's ever been in his career. With this extension, does LeBron win another championship?
Probably not. I mean, I would say highly unlikely. It's just really hard now for them to get the talent they're going to need, especially in a West where Warriors are still going to be really good for a couple of years. Grizzlies are on the rise. Dallas will eventually get a number 2, and they're still going to be really good with Luka. And we could go down the list. Minnesota's going to be good. Minnesota got better. I don't know if they're a contender, but they're going to win games. And on down the list. I just don't. Denver, Clippers, I just don't see how they get past these teams. So my guess is no. But if they're going to be great, you mentioned the name that has to. If it's bubble Anthony Davis, they got a puncher's chance in any series because that Anthony Davis is elite, right? And by the way, I think that's what the real test is for them this year. If Anthony Davis was brought in to be the next number 1, if he's not capable of physically or in any way carrying that burden, you got to rethink your long term.
And that's interesting. And I want to ask this just because I love using this word. Does this officially put the kibosh on LeBron James going back to Cleveland? And Kurt, I know you've probably written some pieces about this anyway. With Cleveland, with all the young talent there, especially if they do bring back Colin Sexton, they have Garland, they have Mobley, they have such a nice young team. Was that ever real? Or was that people on the outside trying to link player with homecoming again and something like that? Was that ever real? Does this officially end it?
Great use of the word kibosh, by the way.
It's a kibosh Wednesday down here, so why not?
I don't know that it was really very real. I know LeBron, All-Star Weekend, kind of threw out how happy he was and how much he loved it. And LeBron, you covered him. Does the man ever say anything quite like that on accident?
No, everything is very pointed. Everything is very thought out. Everything is passive aggressive.
Yes.
So I think it's also to make a statement to the Lakers, give me more. It's funny. LeBron James is brilliant. He knows basketball. He knows basketball numbers. He knows the salary cap. With Rich Paul, he's figured out how to, I don't say game the system, but beat the system. And yet every now and then he'll do something like, you've got to get me more, when he knows you can't get him more, that Pelinka can't get him more because this is the way the cap works. So then he turns very naive. I don't care how you do it. I want to get more like they do back in Cleveland. They've got all those young players now. Why can't we get something like that? And you sort of run into that with LeBron. Want to turn it here real quick. In our first segment, for those who missed it, we spoke about Kevin Durant. You can go listen to the podcast here on our Inside the Paint, redrecover.com show. But I mentioned briefly Donovan Mitchell. And again, you know so much about how sort of the sauce is made anyway. But for whatever reason, and I don't know why, Shams decided this week to bring back the Donovan Mitchell thing and to say the Knicks have re-engaged. And now I'm seeing Charlotte, which makes no sense to me, has re-engaged also. Is there anything new with Donovan Mitchell truly, or is it just this is what we do? I've even heard sometimes Pro Basketball Talk does this also, where you cycle back to something just to sort of get a feel for what's there. Is there anything new with Donovan Mitchell? Have things been restarted? He's actually playing tonight in the Pro-Am in Miami. He's going to play in the same team as Bam Adebayo and Colin Sexton, so I'm sure there'll be more coming out after that game tonight. But is there actual, real, genuine movement, do you feel, on Donovan Mitchell?
Yeah, you can only hope Donovan Mitchell comes out of that Pro-Am tonight and goes, man, I love playing with Bam. And see.
Oh, I know he will, because anything to ruin my weekend. I live that every day as a beat writer, believe me.
I don't know. I found it interesting that Shams put it out there again, right? Like that. He's well sourced. I'm not saying somebody didn't tell him that this is that somebody's trying to stoke the fire again. I'm kind of curious which side or which agent or which person, like who was motivated to say that they're talking again. We've talked about it before. The Knicks remain probably the favorite to get him simply because they can throw more draft picks into the mix, just pure number ones than anybody else. I'm curious if this came from, was it Kyrie's agent? Was it somebody with the Jazz trying to get this rolling? Like, I'm curious where this come from. I still heard, I don't want to say crickets, but there's no real movement. Everybody expects that to be the deal that gets done.
Sure, because of the draft picks and all New York has to offer the draft.
But there's still no pressure, right? We're still 6 weeks from camp opening. Like, there's no reason to have it done this weekend and ruin our weekend. Like, not just because, hey, maybe I can wait this out another week or two and see if I get more. And we'll talk in mid-September when there's actual pressure.
Well, I'm going to give you another column idea over there with your good friends at Pro Basketball Talk, and it's this. Remember, Kurt, when there was an era of a team was going to do right by a player, that if we're going to trade this player, we're going to talk to him, we're going to try to get him to a spot he wants to get to. We've seen this countless times, that if you put in even 2 or 3 or 4 years of service, maybe even with a losing team, we'll take care of you. We'll try to get you where you want to go. We've seen this multiple times play out this way in trades. Look, down here, Kyle Lowry wanted to get to the Heat. The Heat didn't have the money. Masai Ujiri said, you know what? We got younger talent. We're going to retool, if not rebuild. I'll work with you, Kyle Lowry. Hey, I got Precious Achiuwa. I took on Goran Dragic's contract. We'll make this work. I'm starting to see more often now. Kevin Durant has done pretty right by Brooklyn to a degree. Circumstance prevented that. It doesn't seem like Sean Marks cares a rat's butt about doing right by Kevin Durant. And I'm curious about the Donovan Mitchell thing. Donovan Mitchell has done right by the Jazz. Now, it's a different regime. It's different general managers. It's even a different ownership that came in. Can you see any scenario where the Utah Jazz say, well, Donovan, if you really enjoyed that Pro-Am on Wednesday night, August 17th in Miami, and you and Bam really are that close, we don't love the Heat's package of picks as much. We know we can get Tyler Hero, send him out for 2 more first-rounders. We're going to do right by you, young man, because you did right by us. Does that exist anymore in the NBA?
I think so, but I think you may have hit the nail on the head, which is, would Dennis Lindsay and the previous, the Miller family regime have done that?
Yes.
Probably. Will the Ryan Smith, Danny Ainge, yeah, I'm less confident that they would do that. And it might take Donovan being a little more public, being a little more, hey, I want to get to Miami about it. And I don't know where Donovan stands in terms of, he's so easygoing. I got a feeling he's just riding the wave.
But that team is going to be garbage for a while. Because they were playing to win, they would have taken the picks from the Gobert trade already, moved them somewhere else for a supporting player, but they don't want to do that. So they're going to be awful this year. How many games are the Utah Jazz going to win this year, Kurt Helin?
I think they're going to be one of the worst teams. I think ultimately they trade Donovan.
Right.
Wherever. They're going to move Mike Conley. They've already removed Royce O'Neal.
Bogdanovich.
Bogdanovich. By the way, that'll be a steal for somebody. Like, that's a good get. They're going to win in the low 20s. Like, I think they're going to be.
I just wonder if in that case, when you know you're going to purposely be bad, you try to do right by someone or not. I think that's the Heat's only avenue in here. I think he likes it down here. I know he's a Mets fan. He likes the Knicks also. But at least it sort of gets you in that Durant, Phoenix, or Miami talk like we had earlier in the summer. Okay, after this break, we're going to turn it to the Miami Heat. I had a chance this week to speak to both Udonis Haslem and Tyler Hero. I got clicks on both stories from Kurt Helin. We spoke about both of those, and I think they're, in their own way, very different. There's one player at the end of his career deciding whether he wants to come back and still help out. There's another player at the very start of his career still trying to figure out where he fits, both with the team and geographically. So we're going to turn it toward the Heat in our final segment here of the Inside the Paint Show, brought to you by RedRecover.com. Welcome back to the Inside the Paint Show, brought to you by RedRecover.com. I'm Ira Winderman here on this side of the screen for those watching on YouTube. And hey, that's Kurt Helin over there on the other side from NBCSports.com and Pro Basketball Talk. And Kurt, I had a chance this week to talk to a couple of Heat players. I guess I'll talk to the young, sexy player first. As we spoke about in our first segment, you can catch that on the podcast about whether the Heat are sexy enough for national television. Apparently, the answer we got today on schedule day was no. Tyler Hero's in a really interesting situation. He has gone through his entire career as the subject of trade rumors every single offseason. He was drafted in 2019. It was all copacetic and fine. As soon as the Heat went to the NBA Finals in 2020, he was this hot young thing. His value was high. The Heat were looking to possibly make a Giannis move or others. It was a short offseason, fortunately for him. This past offseason, the same type of thing. Actually, after last season, the same type of thing. Then this offseason, the same thing. Now we're at a point where there's sort of dual outside forces at play with Tyler Hero. He's the guy you trade if you want to make a move for Durant, if you want to make a move for Donovan Mitchell, if you want to make some other move. He's your sexiest asset. I guess that's the way to put it. Also, now that we know when the Heat season starts, we know the extension deadline off of a rookie scale is one day before your opener. For the Heat, that's October 18th. That if the Heat do not extend Tyler by then, they cannot go back during the regular season. They have to wait till next summer. He becomes a restricted free agent. And all of a sudden, with the Phoenix Suns, with DeAndre Ayton, all over again next summer. We saw how kind of ugly, I guess, Kurt, that played out. So I'm just going to ask you sort of a couple of thoughts after I sort of relate this. Spoke to Tyler. He was so professional. And he told me and Anthony Chang of the Miami Herald, I got to get ready for a season. If it's with the Miami Heat or it's with another team, I've got to get ready because I'm a player and that's what I do. And that really bodes well for him. And here's the odd thing. It might even bode well for him in a trade because an outside team might say, hey, this kid's more mature than I thought he was. This kid gets it. This kid will come in, and whether I'm in Indiana or Sacramento or Oklahoma City, and he'll get it that it's just about the game. Is there a point, Kurt, do you think, where the Heat and Tyler Hero can feel comfortable when it comes to a trade, where the Heat say, we'll talk about the extension in a second, where the Heat say, Tyler's definitely with our team this season, Coach Eric Spoelstra, design all you want with him. Think about putting him in your starting lineup. He's definitely here. And is there a time when Tyler Hero can think, I'm going to be in Miami all season?
Wouldn't you say that's, I don't want to say midway through training camp. It's kind of hard to pick a specific date, but 10 days or so left in training camp. You can't, you got to be careful messing with the roster after that. And doesn't that feel like you get to October 8th to 10th and say, hey, all right, we're not moving him and we should move on to the extension, serious extension discussions, because I mean, like you said, this is such a team built on continuity and a franchise built on treating people the right way, like we've been talking about all, throughout this whole podcast and whole day on YouTube. At some point, you got to do that. You got to just be fair to the guy and say, hey, you're here or you're not, because and we talk about it almost in a fantasy basketball sense of, hey, who can we get and what we do? You're uprooting lives. Like, it is not easy on guys to be in those trade rumors and have that kind of hanging over them. Even if they're professional.
I'm going to go a little different direction. I think you're also uprooting your coaching staff, and I'll tell you why. Eric Spoelstra does have personnel control, but he always tells me, he goes, look, do I have input? Do I talk to Pat, Andy? Absolutely. But I got a job here to coach, and it's a full-time job that requires all my attention. This camp we go into to take people back to the start of the offseason, Tyler Hero comes out the day after the season ends on May 29th against the Celtics, Game 7, Eastern Conference Finals. And as he should and could, says, for the first time in my career, I want to be a starter. He's played almost exclusively off the bench his first 3 years. We wait about, I think it was 5 or 6 days, and Pat Riley asked him the same question. He leans in his Pat Riley way and says, earn it. Come to camp and earn it. Now, the Miami Heat will play a decidedly different style if their 3 wings are Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler, and Tyler Hero than if their 3 wings are Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler, and Max Strus. There'll be less spacing. It'll be different floor positions. It'll be more another ball handler, another slasher in there. So, Kurt, my point to you is you told me about 10 days left in camp or something like that. Means you're mostly through your preseason schedule, let's say at least halfway through. Yeah. Doesn't Eric Spoelstra need time if he's going to do something that major? Or do you think Eric Spoelstra has such a beautiful mind that he can say, I have plan A over here, I have plan B over there, I'll just work with both of them? That seems to be a lot harder in my view.
It does seem to be a lot harder. And I think part of what we can't predict sitting here is how these things, I mean, you may be able to tell a lot earlier. Hey, maybe Donovan gets traded prior to the start of training camp, and that one's off the table. And you watch the Nets early in training camp, and they're Daryl Morey last year with Ben Simmons. They're cool as a cucumber under the pressure. You might decide much earlier that nothing's happening and be able to make this decision. I think you have to play it a little by the outside situation. And like you said, I think a little bit by, you've got to talk to Spoelstra. How much time does he feel he needs? How many games does he feel? Not that, again, it's preseason, but you want to give that, if that's your starting, if you're switching up your starting wings, you'd like to give them a quarter here and a quarter there to get some running. Right? Yeah.
To mesh. It's almost like the NFL thing of, do you play your guys in the preseason at all? Well, if you have a new running back or a new receiver or a new quarterback, you sort of want to develop that rhythm, maybe even with your left tackle if you have a typical right-handed quarterback, and just get that going a little. The other thing you referenced was the extension. And it's more than just, I think, Kurt, if there's no deal with 10, 8, 6 days left in training camp, you can move on to the extension. Here's my question to you. Can you? For this reason. Once Tyler Hero is extended, a poison pill kicks in. Oh, yeah. Basically, I'm not going to go through the math for everyone, but it means he becomes untradeable for the balance of that season until next summer. The reason being is he would have a $5 million a year left on his contract. A new contract extension would start at $25 million. So it would change the amount of money you could send him out for and the amount of money you could take him in. Bottom line, once you do that, I think Bobby Marks actually had a thing of the last 75 players who were poison pill, only Devin Harris was traded. No one gets traded once they're on a poison pill contract. So why would you, Kurt Helin, I'm going to put you on the spot, keep mentioning your name, full name here to put you more on the spot. Why would you extend Tyler and not give yourself the chance to trade him in November or December or January or before the mid-February NBA trading deadline? Why would you, as you just said, or maybe you want to backtrack here a little bit, why would you extend him and lose that trade opportunity? I'm just curious.
I don't mean to just throw this right back at you because
sure.
I think you're going to be more knowledgeable about this than I will. How do you see Tyler as part of the future of the Heat? If you see him as part of the future, you lock him up at that point. And then granted, we're talking about trades for all-star and in Kevin Durant's case, superstar level players. It's a little different. I guess that's the question. Do they see him as part of the long term? Or Ira, do they see him as a piece they want a player they want to move to get the guy who's the long-term guy.
You know, I'm also, if you're watching on YouTube, I love that we have this little white barrier in between, because literally Kurt and I right now are playing volleyball. So I'm gonna, okay, he just sent it over the net to me, and I'm scrambling for the ball. And this is what I'd say about that. I can understand. You could say, where do the Heat view him long term? What if Victor Oladipo explodes and they have to redo him in free agency? And I get all that. What I always say though is I never let the short term impact the extension, because the extension is going to be 4 or 5 years. So it has to be the long view also. Not only what do I have now, but what's going to be there in the future. I do an extension or a near max extension under these terms, and I'm about to send the ball back over the other side of this little white barrier over here. Over here. Yeah, I'm pointing the right way. And it's this. That way. I do an extension if I think a player can be great. I think, and I think the Heat believe, Bam Adebayo can be great. With his unique skill set, he is great in his skill set. I extend him. Obviously, Dwayne Wade, you extend it. He could be great. That's a strong word, though. Great to me means multiple-time All-Star, means in contention, which Bam is already a one-time All-Star. I think he'll be back there. Oh, yeah. It means in contention for All-NBA, one of the 15 best players in the league in a given year. Bam's already had one of those nods. I think he'll get more. Is Tyler Hero, and again, you're a GM right now, Kurt. Do you believe that Tyler Hero necessarily will be great?
By that definition, by multiple-time All-Star, All-NBA, I'm not convinced he's that guy. I'm sure you read it. I'm sure most of the people who read this read the Zach Lowe deep dive on him earlier this year, where he settled on the CJ McCollum.
Right. Nice player.
Great guy in the community. Smart. You'd like to have him around. Third best player on a championship team, maybe? And you better have the right players around in the audience.
Yeah,
and that's I think where Tyler is.
And to me, so that's the thing. I think that's what you judge it on, because as you know, when you're seeing it in LA now with the Westbrook and the Davis and LeBron contracts, you get 3 of those on your books and you're screwed. Yeah. You know, and you're getting Austin Reeves or whatever the hell his name is as a rotation player, because that's where you're left with what you have left in your rotation. You're grabbing older veterans for a season in an Ellington and a Ariza, and you sort of get locked in. That's why I think the Heat wait. And there's something interesting also. The way Tyler spoke to me about his professional business-like approach, and this might backfire on him. He was candid. If I think Tyler is not going to be a problem without an extension, it makes it easier for me not to give him one. Yes. Bam came from a hard-scrapple upbringing. He was raised in a single-wide trailer. He wanted to take care of his mom, who's down here in Miami with him. He had a great story. He sort of felt compelled that he wanted his money and he wanted it now. I think you can wait for Tyler. I know the DeAndre Ayton thing was very uncomfortable for Phoenix this year. I think free agency was very uncomfortable for the Suns and DeAndre Ayton. But I think the Suns thought the same thing about DeAndre Ayton. I think when James Jones and Monty Williams and their front office sat down there, they said to themselves, can DeAndre Ayton be great? Will he ever be a regular All-Star? Will he be a regular on All-NBA? And I'm not so sure he will be. So they put the ball in someone else's court. Okay, someone makes an offer, we'll deal with it then. Maybe we can trade him. That's what I think is interesting about Tyler, is I think he's going to be, like Zach Lowe said, a very, very good player. Yeah. But I can't give very, very great money to a very, very good player, which is why, honestly, and I know it could get difficult, I would wait on the extension, because I could always sign him as a restricted free agent next summer.
I think my other 2 questions there are simply this. A, would he accept less than the max, or considerably, would he take a Jalen Brunson for 125 type of deal? Or
Jaylen Brown deal even, which I put him as the equivalent there. And what he got from the Celtics, I think it was like 4 and 108. I think he should, and I think he has to. And I think with DeAndre Ayton, there's so few quality big men that I think the Suns had to blink at the end, because you're not going to find that necessarily. Sort of like the Heat did with Bam when they gave him his extension, when they were thinking about trying to save the money for Giannis Antetokounmpo, when they didn't know if Giannis was going to re-up with the Bucks. So I get that also. I think Tyler might want it all because his agent's telling him he wants it all, because his friends are telling him he deserves it all. But I think you have to reach a middle ground. So maybe the middle ground is this. We will do the extension at this, or we can wait. And maybe that's the best compromise for everyone, is the Heat gives a middle ground extension offer that won't cripple their salary cap 4 or 5 years down the road, but will still make sure that Tyler Hero is handsomely played. paid. So I think that's going to be a real interesting point. The other thing, I spoke to Udonis Haslem. His foundation did marvelous work in helping businesses in the urban community with starting funds, along with FTX this weekend. I was very surprised by this. I went to this event with Anthony Chang of the Miami Herald. We fully expected some sort of hints that Udonis Haslem is definitely coming back because 20 is a magic number in the NBA. You play 20 seasons in the NBA, it's something. You play 20 with the same franchise, you're Kobe, you're Dirk. You're in that pantheon, no matter what your productivity might have been. And UD even told us, he said, hey, I want to wait a little. I want to sort of figure this out. I'm not necessarily buying. The Heat have held this roster spot to this point for Udonis. They will have $200,000 left under the luxury tax, no more moves. If Udonis really wasn't thinking about coming back, I think it's almost holding the team hostage, whether it's a Markieff Morris or adding another power forward they could otherwise. Do you expect, having covered the legacy of a Kobe on a different plane, but understanding even to Kobe, when he did decide to retire, it was after 20, when he had that kind of time in, is 20 that kind of magic number?
Yeah, and I'll say, yes, I think it is. I think it's just, we're human. We love those big round numbers, right? It's just in our nature. But the other part of it is, when I read your story, I thought the same thing you were just talking about, which is Udonis Haslem is too invested in the Heat, is too much a believer in everything that they have taught and he has been part of over these years for him to do this, for him to go last minute, go, nah, I don't want it. Like, because it would leave them scrambling to fill that last spot with what's left, as opposed to who they could have gotten a month ago, right?
In July, absolutely.
So I just don't think that's who he is. I read that thinking, yeah, he's coming back.
Yeah, no, I just, I could totally understand where they're sort of coming from. And I can understand also where Udonis is coming from, that it's a hard decision because of the travel and all of that. So I'm just curious. And I know Big O wants us to address also, and Dougie Fresh, or whatever he's going by these days, was asking a question on a question board, which unfortunately I don't have open right now, but because Big O's the boss, I do want to cycle sort of back to that also. But last question, sort of end of the show right here, is when it comes to Kevin Durant and having to draw a line and all he's been through and all we're going to talk about next week, and we spoke about last week, with all the baggage and everything else, would you still take Kevin Durant, even if it means being part of the circus?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there is a limit to the price. I'm not stripping my team down where I can't, and we've talked about this. I'm not giving up Bam. I have to be able to contend with him on there. And that said, he himself, the drama, there's a lot of drama around him. Guy likes to play basketball. He is truly a hooper. He is truly committed to the game. And if he shows up, he shows up and he's healthy, he's going to play, and he's going to play hard, and he's going to play well. And he's going to give you a chance to win. I personally, yes, I'm all in.
Yeah, and as Doug pointed out in this question, he's just saying he's such a great player and what he's done. And, especially also, we forget this. He hasn't necessarily done great in Brooklyn because of COVID, because of Kyrie, because of injuries. But it was just a year ago when he was playing in the Olympics against the greatest players in the world internationally, alongside some of the best players in the NBA. And he was head and shoulders on almost every game, probably every game, the best player on the court there. We're just 1 year removed from that. So I do think when you look at it there, if you have a chance, we're going to be in the same holding pattern, which I love, because the Inside the Paint, redrecover.com show will always have a Kevin Durant segment, including when I'm out covering the Heat during the preseason and out during training camp. Because again, I think, and I agree with you, and I agree with the question here, when you have a chance for something that great, you don't summarily say, no, during the deadline, look at my watch, 10 seconds to go, yes or no, Brooklyn? I agree. So we will be back next week, back to our maybe usual Wednesday time of 9 a.m. on the East Coast, or as Kurt likes to say, 6 a.m. on the West Coast, with more Heat insight, a little bit more maybe on where Tyler Hero stands, a little bit more maybe on the fallout on the schedule. We addressed all of that today in our show. You can catch it on the podcast on the Big O Show. But for now, the Big O Show, I think even this late, rolls on.
You've been listening. This is is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.